Welcome to Democrats Live. I'm Tom Perez, chair of the DNC. It is great to be here this week, and you can stream live at live.democrats.org, where people can also go to sign up to take action and to donate. I have a remarkably fun guest today who is a good friend that I've known for a number of years, Governor John Hickenlooper of Colorado, who has begun his second term as the governor of Colorado after having been the mayor of Denver, and someone with a remarkable history. And in the depths of the Great Recession, the unemployment rate in Colorado was 9.5% under Governor Hickenlooper's leadership. It's now 2.6%. The basic challenge in Colorado is they have a worker shortage and remarkable opportunities for people to punch their ticket to the middle class. A real illustration of the fact that leadership does matter. And when you have Democrats in governor's mansions, good things happen to good people. And so we're thrilled to have you here, Governor. I've enjoyed my time sitting in your kitchen table when I visited Denver with you and Teddy and learning about what you've done. For the benefit of our listeners who don't know you as well as I've had the privilege of knowing you, tell us a little bit about your background and your the comparison to Sam Adams that some people make.
Well, and before I say that, though, I do the 2.6% unemployment, which we are so proud of. I mean, it's the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country, but we are also one of the top 4 states in terms of equity of income. In other words, everyone's income is rising together, and we're one of the real states that can claim that, and we're even more proud about that. My own journey, as you say, I came out to Colorado. I grew up on the East Coast and came out to Colorado right out of school as a geologist. I had a master's in geology and I worked as an exploration geologist. And, the price of oil collapsed and everybody got laid off. And I was out of work for about 2 years. And then went and opened a brew pub. I opened the Wine Coop Brewing Company in 1988 in a part of Denver called Lodo, lower downtown, when the rent was $1 a square foot per year. Anyway, I'm the first brewer to be elected governor of a state since Sam Adams in 1792. And I think, according to one of my interns, I'm the only professional working geologist in history to be elected a governor. I'm not sure what that means.
Does this mean that we have Sam Adams beer now? Does this mean we're going to have someday in the future John Hickenlooper beer?
I doubt it.
Okay.
Although we did, when I was in the brewery business, we did have a beer called Hickenlooper Lager, and we used it for the bar side sobriety test. And if a customer couldn't pronounce it, we wouldn't serve them another.
Wow. So. Talk about what you inherited, because you came into office as this nation was climbing out of the worst recession of our lifetime. And you are where you are now, not only with a 2.6 unemployment rate, but also where the rising tide is indeed lifting many boats and not just the yachts. What's been the secret to success in Colorado?
Well, part of it was that we tried to raise every boat. And we had that right from the very beginning as one of the real goals. We went after, we talked about branding the state not just as a tourist destination with great ski resorts, but as a place where young entrepreneurs could come and not just create a business, but create a life for themselves and raise their family. And we wanted to be pro-business, but with the highest environmental standards, the highest ethical standards. We wanted to have, hold our business community accountable. But we started from the beginning cutting red tape and bureaucracy, making it easier for people to start a business, trying to find more ways of letting young entrepreneurs have access to capital. We just wanted more energy, entrepreneurship. Because, when I got laid off as a geologist and then ended up opening this brew pub, for me it was so hard. It was almost 2.5 years from when I got laid off to when I opened the brew pub. We just wanted to make it easier. And I think a lot of the energy in Colorado right now, the reason it's economically doing so well, is we are kind of focused on helping small business people, but again, holding them accountable. And I think that blend is where an awful lot of America is now. Jobs, people really do care about jobs, but they don't want to see any discrimination. They don't want glass ceilings. They don't want bias being held against one person or another in the workplace. And I think we've done a good job of making sure that we've really pushed and tried to diversify our economy so that that it really is a rising tide where everyone is doing better.
Again, we're here, Democrats live and live.democrats.org for those of you who are live streaming. And we have a number of questions from Twitter and from our internet sites that are coming in. And talking here to Governor John Hickenlooper, you mentioned about environmental sustainability, and by way of full disclosure for our listeners here, I moved to D.C. from Colorado, where we spent almost every weekend that we could, summer, winter, spring, and fall, up in the mountains, enjoying it. You were, if my memory serves me, you joined a number of other governors, I think 11 or so, in urging the Trump administration to remain part of the Paris Climate Accord.
Right.
Why'd you do that?
Well, I think it's important, on a bunch of different levels. Obviously, when you're a mile high, and our state is the highest state in America, and I'm not talking about legalizing marijuana.
Initiative? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for all the listeners.
But topographically, it's the highest state in America. There's so much. So many mountains and valleys. I always tease whenever I see Governor Abbott that if you were to have a magical piece of silk and stretch it over the entire state of Colorado, and it would drape over every mountain, fill every valley exactly, and if magically you could raise it up and spread it out, Colorado would be even bigger than Texas. And I think that altitude, all that up and down that we have, it means our air is thinner, and it means air quality makes a big difference. So for us, it's not just a question about the long-term issues of climate change. We certainly believe in that. We can see the climate's changing. There are a lot of very negative consequences that will come to Colorado as well as the rest of the country. But for us, it's even more pronounced that we should always be trying to improve the environment, always try to get to cleaner air. And now that we've made so much progress, we've got so much momentum, wind energy now is less expensive than coal. If you ask most utilities if they were starting a plant right from scratch, would they choose coal or wind? All things being equal, they'd pick wind. It's a cheaper way to generate electricity. That never used to be the case. So now we've got to make sure we keep taking the momentum of cheaper wind, cheaper solar, using natural gas as a fill-in. And I know that irritates a lot of people, but I think wind and solar, sometimes there's a cloudy day, the wind doesn't blow for a few hours. Natural gas can cycle on and off very efficiently. Anyway, we signed the Paris Treaty, right? We committed ourselves with almost 200 other nations that we were going to work on a global basis to try and make our air cleaner. And I think to back away from that now, America, well, let's put it this way. The world needs a strong leader, and for almost a century, that strong leader has been the United States. And to back away from that role, I think not only does it diminish our ability in international relationships and in trade, but I think it makes the globe, the whole world a little weaker.
And let me turn to something you said earlier, John, which was you were talking about job creation, because everywhere I go, this is a common topic of conversation. How do we make sure we're growing the economy in a way that works for everybody, not just for a few at the top? And you were very quick, and appropriately so, to point out that it's not simply an unemployment rate that has gone down to historically low levels, but it is who is benefiting from that. We have a question, actually, that is very relevant to that observation.
This is one of the famous social media questions.
Right.
Exciting.
And it comes from Frankie in Massachusetts, who asks, what specific policies can the Democratic Party enact, or by extension, what you did in Colorado, to encourage social mobility at the federal, state, and local levels? And as you reflect on what Donald Trump wants to do in his tax plan, how will this plan affect businesses, small and others, and access to housing?
Well, we haven't really seen the details of President Trump's tax plan, but we have a pretty good idea of where what direction he's moving in, and it's certainly not it's not going to emphasize equity in terms of compensation and people's opportunity to make a good living. Certainly, when you look at local, state, and federal level employees, historically our ability to create opportunity is much greater, but it's got to expand beyond that. So I think we have to protect and preserve that, make sure we really hold on to our pensions. Look at how many pensions are gone from the private sector completely. I think that if we can resolve some of the challenges we have with some of the pensions and get them back where they're in compliance with what the expectations are, then we can become a model for a private sector, and it's probably going to evolve, and there'll be some different kinds of pensions. But that's a big part of people having a safe future. And then the other part, I think we've got to continue training at a fundamental in a grassroots level in everything, not just training for electricians and pipe fitters, but training for every industry, that bankers or insurance agents or people in aerospace. We need to have apprenticeships and training programs so that as people begin to lose maybe an old career, automation pushes someone to the side or a whole profession to the side, how quickly can we get those folks to the training that'll allow them to have a new life?
I had the good fortune when I was the labor secretary to travel to Colorado to take a look at a specific investment that you were making in apprenticeship. I often refer to apprenticeship as the other college, except without the debt.
Exactly.
And when people think of apprenticeship, they think of the building trades, and the trades have the original patent on apprenticeship. But what you have been doing, and what we tried to do, with a fair amount of success in the Obama administration, was to expand apprenticeship, because the former CEO of Zurich Insurance, for instance, he was an apprentice and he worked his way up to CEO.
Right, he didn't get his college degree until he was like 27, I think.
And apprenticeship has application in every profession. You look at people who come out of medical school. What do? They're doing an apprenticeship. And so there are health professions applications. There are applications in the insurance sector. There are applications in cybersecurity. All of these in-demand sectors. And talk about, and this is really relevant to Frankie's question, how do we not only encourage mobility, but make sure that people are equipped to sustain that mobility throughout a very dynamic economic cycle where you have sometimes headwinds that can really rear their ugly head?
Well, automation is just going to continue, and we know that. So we've got to do everything we can to prepare people for all those changes. And our apprenticeship program in Colorado is modeled on the Swiss, but it's different, but it's similar. If you look at Switzerland, their kids when they're 16 can go to work for a company and then spend a day or two going back and doing schooling. But their unemployment for kids that are between the ages of 18 and 30, their unemployment is about 2.5 to 3%, right? Our unemployment in this country for that age group is like 10 or 12%, and if you're Latino, it's 16 or 18%, and if you're African American, it can be as high as 25%, depending on where you are. So theirs is the inverse. In other words, they're making sure the young people get jobs kind of first, and it allows you to really imagine. Our program, we call it CareerWise in Colorado. Kids are going to be able to go, instead of their junior year in high school, if they want to, they can go get a job, work 3 days, make $15 an hour. But then the 2 days where they go to school, they'll be learning stuff that is directly applicable to the job they're doing. So if they're working for an insurance company, they'll learn how to be better at that job. If they're working in an aerospace company or they're working in cybersecurity, it's really going to allow them to be more successful in their job. And I think that's the magic here. We want that kind of apprenticeship attitude to go throughout an individual's life. So it's always learning, and as professions change, how do we take the skills people have and use that package of skills to prepare them? Maybe they'll need some more training, but prepare them for a whole new career that I think in some cases will end up being a better fit. As I mentioned, I was a geologist, right? I was trained out of master's. I worked 5 years. I thought I'd be a geologist forever. Well, then I was out of work for a couple of years. We opened this brew pub. The first day I was in that brew pub, I knew I was going to be better at running a restaurant than I ever was as a geologist. And it's funny, if we do this right, some people's lives, instead of being laid off being the worst thing that ever happens to you, at least for some people, they should be able to look back and say, that wasn't so bad. That actually was a benefit.
And that's what the role of government is for many people that I had the good fortune of seeing at the Labor Department. They had tremendous skill and tremendous drive. The job that they were doing left that community. And our job was to make sure that we could equip them with the skills to compete for the jobs of tomorrow. That's what you're doing in these investments in apprenticeship, which are relevant to the 16-year-old or the 18-year-old and to the 50-year-old. We've seen apprenticeship programs that run the gamut age-wise, and what they all have in common is they are a ticket to middle-class prosperity. Right,
and we're going to have more training and look at, automation and all this technology and imaging. And, it is, not only is it at eliminating huge numbers of jobs, that's why these small companies with relatively few employees become worth, billions and billions of dollars, but it's concentrating wealth at a rate we haven't seen before, even as it eliminates jobs. Actually, because it eliminates jobs is how that wealth gets created. I don't think it's unfair to say, all right, we should take a sliver of that wealth that's created and focus it on training. And, government's not going to create all these industries. We're not going to create the jobs. But we can make sure that as the economy changes and new jobs do evolve and appear, I think everybody who's willing to work hard enough deserves a chance. And if it's 1 year of training, that's fine. If it takes 4 years or 5 years of training, if they're willing to work and keep at it, we should keep supporting them.
When you look at the United States relative to the rest of the industrialized world in terms of what the federal government invests in our human capital, we talk about infrastructure projects, and that's very important. I often talk about human capital infrastructure, and we get our butts kicked by most other nations in the world in our investment in human capital. And you look at this so-called skinny budget that the Trump administration proposed. It actually proposed to disinvest in our human capital infrastructure, which made no sense to me because, again, I meet people all the time with talent who got kicked to the curb in the recession or as a result of automation or some other force that was no fault of theirs. And these investments, I don't call them programs, they're investments. These investments are a lifeline, and that's exactly what you're doing in Colorado.
Or people lost their, or through a health episode, someone has a heart attack or, is very sick for 6 months and 9 months. All of a sudden, they've lost their job, and in some cases they can't get back into the workforce. All these things, we need, government has to be the convener that allows people to come find, put the convener between training and providing people the skills so they can get those new jobs.
Well, you mentioned a healthcare catastrophe. I want to switch topics slightly to a healthcare catastrophe that occurred recently in the United States House of Representatives, and that was the Republican House bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I was over there with many people in the progressive movement who were protesting in front of the House of Representatives during that vote. And I observed personally the Republican members walking out of the House after the vote, moving over to a bus that was taking them to the White House for a celebration of the passage of a bill that will remove insurance coverage for millions of Americans, over 20 million Americans. If you're on Medicare, it's going to make it harder for you to get access to prescription drugs that there's $1,500, $2,000 a year for so many seniors in prescription drug benefits. If you have diabetes or some other pre-existing condition, you're out of luck under this bill. It fails every test of a good health care bill, whether it's cost, whether it's quality, whether it's coverage. It fails economic tests. It fails healthcare tests. It fails the moral test of governance. And you're someone in the front lines of Colorado governing, and you don't print money as a state executive, to the best of my knowledge. And what did the Affordable Care Act mean for Colorado, and what does this proposed repeal without any meaningful replacement mean potentially for not just Colorado, but Colorado best, but as from the perspective of governor?
Sure, we'll look at Colorado as a microcosm, as a symbol of what the rest of the country experienced. When we engaged with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. I still love calling it Obamacare. We expanded coverage by over 600,000 people. Colorado has a population of about 5.5 million. We were able to, almost 400,000 of that were people, or more than 400,000 people were people on Medicaid. In the process of doing that, not only did we improve and save lives, but we also gave, and we heard this back repeatedly from the business community, we had a more consistent workforce. People weren't coming to work sick. They weren't getting sick on the job. They weren't taking extended time away from work. But we also, it became part of the economic vitality of the state of Colorado, because we have people in the process of making sure everyone's healthy. We are, and improving the workforce, we're creating jobs at that very same time. So I look at it, there's no, by any way you look at it, the Affordable Care Act was a benefit to Colorado. And the new health care bill that came out of the House, by any way you measure in terms of the delivery of health care as a policy, it makes things worse. The only thing it really addresses I think even from a Republican point of view, is that it's a massive tax cut for very, very wealthy, high-earning Americans, which, at least in Colorado, I've talked to a dozen, maybe a dozen, maybe almost 2 dozen people who are high earners, and said, are you fighting to get this tax cut? Is this something that matters to you? I haven't had one person say, yeah, no, I deserve this. I want that pay cut. For them, 2% or 2.5%, again, nobody likes to pay taxes, but they understand the money's being used to make sure that people get health care, that people with pre-existing conditions are going to be able to, still go to work, get in health insurance. To take all that away solely to give a tax cut to very wealthy people who don't seem to want it, I don't get it. I don't understand, even politically. I don't see what the payoff is.
And again, for benefit of our listeners, the Affordable Care Act was originally funded. So the subsidies that someone gets if you are moderate income were funded by a tax on wealthy people. And this is a point that is often lost in this debate, because a big part of the reason why these folks on the right have been hell-bent on repealing the Affordable Care Act is it is a massive tax cut back to wealthy people, and an age tax on people 50 years old or older. So if you're 55 years old here and you are getting coverage right now, you are going to be the victim of a tax hike simply because of your age. And
it's cost shifting.
It's absolutely, and if you're a state, it's the sick people who are going to get sicker are going to go to your emergency rooms, and they're going to receive care, and it's going to be uncompensated care. So this notion that you're saving money, you're simply shifting the cost to the state and then to local governments, and building a healthcare system that is both less efficient and, frankly, immoral.
Yeah, and it's not going to lower premiums. It's going to put all kinds of obstacles up to the momentum we've had. It's, in Colorado, since 2012, we have been able to hold the per capita cost of Medicaid. So per person, our cost each year has been flat. We've been able to hold that from one year after another from 2012. Well, that's part of doing a systemic approach. So, and we all agree that there were a number of improvements that could happen and needed to happen to Obamacare, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's, and I think this health care plan that came out of the House really, again, from a policy delivery point of view, it doesn't make any sense. In almost every regard, it makes the healthcare system less effective, less fair, and less efficient.
I'm always a little befuddled with this president because he likes to brand everything, the Trump Tower, Trump steaks, and Trump ties, and Trump suits, and he doesn't seem to want to own Trump Care. And he called it Ryan Care, and the best name I can think of is I Don't Care, because their plan seems to evince no level of concern for people who need health care.
Well, I thought Paul Ryan called it Trump Care.
And Donald Trump called it Ryan Care.
All right, so that's like
so there you have it. And the unity of the opposition has been remarkable. And this is kind of a segue. I'd like to spend the last amount of time we have, still got 10 minutes or so, talking about the future of the Democratic Party. Because Colorado, when I was living there years ago, was, it was sometimes a very red state. Sometimes you'd elect Tim Wirth. But then you'd move back and you'd elect Hank Brown, and you went back and forth. And we've seen tremendous progress, although I believe at least 2 Republican members of the House voted for the repeal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we should shout them out by name.
Well, I think that they are going to have a tough. One of them was Scott Tipton, and he covers a huge rural part of the state, and if you look at who really suffers, if you take away Obamacare, it is the rural parts of not just Colorado, but of America. Some of the counties with the highest percentage of people on Medicaid are people that, they're doing the best they can, but they live in rural parts of America and rural parts of Colorado. And I think Scott Tipton's going to have a hard time to answer to his supporters and the people of rural Colorado why he was willing to, why he wanted to go out and support Trump care.
The opioid epidemic has touched every corner of America. It does not discriminate by zip code. It doesn't discriminate by socioeconomic status, by race. It is, it always boggles my mind that you would take access to health care that has enabled communities, rural, urban, and suburban, to combat this, what we can only describe as an epidemic. If this House bill becomes law, it will be much harder to combat the opioid epidemic across this country.
Absolutely.
So one thing that's always amazed me and impressed me and excited me about Colorado is you have a very vibrant millennial population there. And not just on the ski slopes, but across the state. And there's 2 questions. One is from Twitter. One is from Bo from Georgia. And it's a appropriate question coming from Bo from Georgia because we have a remarkably qualified millennial candidate in John Ossoff running for Congress in Congressional District 6.
He's in a real race.
And he's going to win. And he's 30 years old. And his freshman year college roommate is my press secretary.
Oh, no kidding.
I know John. I know a lot about John, and he's a wonderful candidate. And these 2 questions really get at the millennial issue. And let me just read them both, and perhaps we can discuss them together. I'm a proud millennial Democrat. I support the Democratic Party and candidates that have progressive values. I find that while among my peers and friends many share the same values I do, however, they're hesitant to join the Democratic Party or even in learning more about the party. What can I do as a Democrat to show that the party represents their values? That's Bo. And more generally, this was a question we got from Twitter, which is effectively the same question, which is what can the DNC and the Democratic Party do to engage with and empower young people? And this question adds, especially in red and purple states.
Sure. And those are both good questions. And we've obviously haven't done a good enough job in engaging millennials and really getting them to show up and not just come to a rally, but to go to weekly meetings and get involved. I tell young people all the time, they say, well, what can I do? I say, if you're not willing to run yourself, go help someone who is, right? And best case, go run for a school board, get in at the whatever grassroots level you can. Be a staffer for a city council member or a state legislator, but get involved in some way. And if you don't want to get involved, make sure you're helping people that do. I think the party, and again, we're always going to be the party of social justice and civil rights. We're always going to be the party of protecting, making sure there's equity in what people get paid for their labor. That we're always going to be the party that protects the planet, right, and speaks out on things like climate change. But we also should be the party that really owns the entire issue of job creation and making sure that everybody gets a fair compensation for a fair day's work. And we somehow, the Republican Party has spent, and it's not just them, but outside interests especially have spent billions of dollars, my grandfather would call it blaspheming the Democrats, right? And saying just whether they don't care whether it's true or not, but they're just saying, well, the Democrats are against jobs and they're against this. It's not true, and we've got to reach out, and especially to the people that disagree with us. And here I'm talking even many moderate Republicans who, when you sit down and talk to them, and in Colorado we sit down with these folks and say, all right, here's what we're doing. This is why long term this economic expansion that we're right in the middle of, that we're really, as in Colorado, trying to lead, this is why it's going to continue, because we're doing these 3 or 4 things that help make sure that everybody participates in this economic recovery. And when you lay it out to them and say, listen, we're cutting red tape. We're getting rid of the unnecessary regulation, but certain regulations really are necessary to make sure that everybody participates and has an equal shot at opportunity. Most times when I have that discussion, people go, didn't know that. Can you get me some more? And it's just, we've got to reach out to the people. Instead of just talking to each other, we've got to reach out to the people that disagree with us and make sure we have accurate, real, valid, the real information to give them, so that they say, now I see there's a different way from, to a large extent, there's so much negativity coming out of the Republican Party, and that's been that way for a number of years. It's about all the bad things this, bad thing that. I think the country's ready to get back to a positive stance and say, all right, here's the good stuff we're doing.
When we put hope on the ballot, Democrats do well. When we allow Donald Trump and others to put fear on the ballot and divide us, we don't do so hot. Yeah. That has been the case. Bo, the question that Bo asked, he talked about the fact that he's a Democrat and many of his peers share the same values but are not necessarily members of the Democratic Party. And I think that's the key, Bo, is our values are aligned. If you take all the issues that the millennial generation cares about, and as the parent of 3 millennials, I have my own focus group. Whether it's climate change, I was out last week at a number of different resistance events, and whether it was immigration, whether it was climate, whether it's all of these various events. And when people see the Democratic Party next to you on issues that you care about, adding value, not trying to take over, but adding value, showing that we're putting our values in action. That's why I was in a number of airports in the immediate aftermath of January 20th when the senseless Muslim bans were put into place. And when we put our values in action and we demonstrate what we are for, I believe that is our best strength. And we see it most recently in the Affordable Care Act debate. People across an ideological spectrum, frankly, Republicans and Democrats and independents and Green Party folks came together because we understand that for Democrats, health care is a right. It's not a privilege. And so Bo and others, I think the challenge for our Democratic Party is to lead with our values. And that's exactly what people like Governor Hickenlooper do when you're out there, whether it's supporting the minimum wage or whether it's supporting investments in job creation or urging the president to continue with the Paris Climate Accords. I think we have to continue to put our values into action every single day and articulate what we stand for, because we hear that a lot, that we have to talk about what we stand for as a party. Well,
and you're right about immigration is a classic example. A lot of the refugees that are coming in this country have been, they've been in refugee camps for years. They've been vetted. It is the most rigorous scrutiny that anybody could ever go through. And in many cases, these individuals were working on behalf of our soldiers in Iraq or Afghanistan. If we turn our back on a lot of these folks, what does that say to the world in terms of future needs in places of conflict?
Exactly. We have time for probably one more question, and I want to try to combine a few questions into one. And the frame is this: we are coming up in 2017. We have 2 important gubernatorial elections. We have many important municipal elections, and then 2018 we have a number of important gubernatorial elections that will not only be elections for a 4-year cycle, but in many levels it'll be an election for a 12-year cycle. And that's because that person who is in the governor's residence in Colorado or Pennsylvania or Michigan or Wisconsin or Maryland or elsewhere is going to play an indispensable role in redistricting. And that person is going to potentially have impact on how people vote. We have a question here from a listener, David, from Facebook. Why are U.S. voting lines so long? People see it on TV, and because they work long hours, have small kids, or have a disability, or might be a little bit older and a little more frail, they end up not voting. We have another question talking about the importance of having a Democratic governor when it comes to the fight against gerrymandering. And when we look at these issues, this is really going to the heart of a lot of what 2017 and 2018 are about.
Right, making sure that we get fair districts so that people have a real choice. In Colorado, we are an all-mail ballot, so you don't have those long lines. Everyone gets a mailed ballot if they're registered to vote, even if they haven't voted in the last election. And I think that is a huge and important step to get to, that everybody deserves a chance to vote. And I think, you have to be active voter. I think if you actually haven't voted for some number of elections, that maybe they might not send you a ballot. But all it takes is a phone call to reactivate your status as active. We need to get, especially with the younger generation, we need to get people in the habit of not just voting but participating. And I think part of it is the attack ads, right? Attack ads work. And what we're seeing now, if you saw in the private sector, Coke hates Pepsi, Pepsi hates Coke, right? They hate each other, but you never see them do an attack ad against each other. If Coke attacked Pepsi sales would go down. If Pepsi attacked Coke, Coke sales would go down. They'd have to attack each other back and counterattack, and you would depress sales in the entire product category of soft drinks. What we're doing is we're depressing sales in the product category of democracy. And all these attack ads turn people, especially young people, millennials, turn them off. They stop paying attention. And it's not just about voting. It's getting people to really pay attention to the issues. Democracy, especially American democracy, is fragile. But it's even more fragile if people aren't paying attention, aren't really engaging themselves. So that's my one. Every time I see a group of millennials, I just try to do everything I can to kind of get them excited.
Well, when I see a 2.6% unemployment rate, if I were living in Colorado, that would get me excited. And I ended with these questions simply because Colorado is an example of a state that is making it easier for eligible people to vote. We have put in place at the DNC, under the leadership of Karen Carter Peterson, who's one of our vice chairs and is a state senator from Louisiana, a voter protection and empowerment unit, because Democrats need to be playing offense on this issue and playing defense. In states like Colorado, where we have progressive leadership, we need to put in place laws that allow people to vote by mail. Oregon is doing this, and other states are looking at this. Other states have been looking at independent commissions to draw districts. Arizona did that years ago, and that has created a level playing field. That's why the Republicans fought it, because they didn't want a level playing field. And that's why at the DNC we're fighting to make sure that we do have this level playing field, and that we're encouraging, through the creation of our voter protection and empowerment unit, that we are protecting this most sacred right to vote. And as someone who has spent many years doing voting rights work, it is so tragically ironic to me that as we come off the 51st or 52nd anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, we find ourselves playing defense more than offense on the issue of voting. And you correctly point out, and when people ask me about 2018, I always point them to 2017, because Democrats can take and will take the governor's mansion in Virginia, and we will do it in New Jersey as well. But we will only do it when people get involved. And Bo in Georgia will take that District 6 in Atlanta on June the 20th. We've got municipal elections of consequence, and the way we win is by building strong parties everywhere. And the way we do that is also by building strong partnerships. We had a very good question that I couldn't get to about working together with a number of the emerging organizations out there like the Indivisibles and Swing Left and so many other groups. And again, the answer, I think, is the same as what you said before, Governor, about the millennials, which is we work side by side. We put our values into action. We don't attempt to Bigfoot anyone, but we demonstrate that we're all in this together. This is a remarkable moment in our nation's history, and it is so important for us in these coming elections, which is why we wanted to have a governor on Democrats Live. It is so important for our listeners to engage at a statewide level. The mission of the DNC is to help elect Democrats from the school board to the governor's residence to the Senate and everywhere in between. And when we have strong leaders and we have strong parties and we have strong partnerships, that's how we succeed.
Well,
so, Governor,
and one of our
one
of our strongest partners. I just wanted to, on air, thank you, because I know the sacrifices it made for you to come and take the job, and you've got probably one of the hardest jobs in the entire country. And as you point out, it could not be more important. So on behalf of the state of Colorado, I can speak easily. I'm going to stretch it a little bit and just say on behalf of the entire country, we appreciate that great job you're doing.
Well, thank you. And when we build strong parties and strong partnerships and elect good Democrats, good things happen across this country. That's exactly what we're doing. So thank you for your questions today. Thank you, Governor, for being here. And that does it for Democrats Live. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.